Greetings, listeners, and welcome to Everyday Tales Audio. Today, we bring you a deeply moving story titled A Woman at 70. At 70, most people think of retirement and family gatherings. But for a woman like Mrs. Clara Thompson, it's the moment she chooses to start her life anew. After over 30 years of enduring a hollow marriage, waiting for a man who abandoned her and their 4 children in their darkest hour, Clara refused to live another day pretending. She filed for divorce, let go of the past, and, for the first time, lived true to herself. A woman at 70 might seem too late to start over, but sometimes it's at life's twilight that true freedom and peace are found. Join us as we share her courageous and profound journey in today's episode. At 70, Clara Thompson was a woman admired by her small-town Ohio community for her resilience, work ethic, and extraordinary strength. Not every woman possesses such grit. For years, folks called her Mrs. Thompson, tying her identity to the husband who shared half her life but deserted her and their kids when they needed him most. As a wife, mother, and daughter-in-law, Clara carried her family through hardship. She raised 4 young children and cared for a frail mother-in-law while her husband vanished without a word. From a simple, small-town woman with little education, she became the family's backbone, working odd jobs, running a small roadside stand, and tending to her mother-in-law while raising her kids to be upright adults. When her children grew successful, Clara lived her later years in a spacious 3-story home built by her eldest son. From the outside, it looked like Clara was enjoying a comfortable, fulfilled retirement. But no one knew the silent wound she carried, a scar from a lifetime of betrayal she'd never voiced. That is, until Mr. Harold Thompson, the husband she thought was a ghost of the past, quietly returned, living in a small shed at the edge of their property. In the modest cabin her children built for him, old wounds stirred beneath the surface. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, Clara, who'd spent her life swallowing her pain, made a decision that stunned her family. She would divorce Harold, not out of anger or revenge, but to free herself. It was a late choice, but never too late. Clara had made up her mind. She'd carried this decision in her heart for years but only now found the courage to speak it. Not because she needed anyone's approval, but because she owed herself a life aligned with her emotions, her pain, and the grievances she'd never expressed. That evening, in the warm glow of her living room, scented with faint cedar, her 4 children gathered. The air was heavy, unusually still. They exchanged glances, sensing something big. Clara stood, her eyes sweeping over each child: Michael, the eldest son who'd shouldered family duties as a teenager; David, the reserved second son; Sarah, the calm and private eldest daughter; and Emily, the youngest, spirited yet perceptive. Taking a deep breath, Clara spoke, unloading a burden she'd carried for decades. "I've called you here to tell you something. I'm divorcing your father." The room froze. Sarah gasped, "Mom, what? You're 70, why divorce now?" David frowned, his voice low but trembling. "Is something upsetting you, Mom? Have you thought this through?" Clara didn't answer immediately. She gazed out the window toward the shed where Harold lived like a shadow. Turning back to her children, her eyes softened, but her voice held an unfamiliar resolve. "I've lived nearly my whole life. For almost 70 years, I raised you, kept this family together, and never once put myself first. Now, I want to do something I should have done long ago." No one spoke. Michael, the eldest, bowed his head, his hands clenched in his lap. Clara continued, her tone free of bitterness or blame, as if she were finally naming her pain. "I don't hate your father. I don't even resent him. I just want to live my final days without facing the man who made me cry until I had no tears left. I hope you understand." The room stayed silent. No one stopped her. They all knew Clara had been too strong, too steadfast as a mother and wife. If she wanted one thing for herself, divorce, even this late, was her right. The room remained hushed after Clara's announcement. Her children's eyes fixed on their 70-year-old mother, the woman who'd carried them through the darkest times. No one objected outright, but shock etched their faces. After a moment, Michael drew a breath, his voice low and steady, holding back a flood of emotions. "Mom, we love and respect you. You've given everything for us, endured so much pain. Now that Dad's back, you should be at peace with your grandkids. Why leave now?" Clara paused, then turned to David, her voice softening almost to a whisper. "If I wanted to live with you, would you be okay with that?" Caught off guard, David's eyes welled up. He didn't answer right away, just squeezed her hand and nodded firmly. "Of course, Mom. My wife and I will take care of you." Clara smiled, a rare, relieved smile her children hadn't seen in years. Her gaze drifted to a framed photo on the mantel, a portrait of her late mother-in-law, whose gentle eyes seemed to watch over the room. Clara spoke again, addressing all 4 children. "After your father and I divorce, I'll move in with David for a while. As for your father, I want you to let him stay in this house. This land belonged to his family, and you built this home. It's your duty as his children to treat him kindly. Whatever he's done, he's still your father, and his blood runs in your veins. Be good to him." The room fell quiet again. No one argued. They knew when Clara decided something, she'd thought it through, a choice born from years of silent endurance. Michael stared at his mother, his lips pressed tight, eyes glistening as he tried to hide his emotions. He'd never fully grasped the depth of pain his mother carried in a marriage he thought was long buried. He said nothing more, just lowered his head in quiet agreement, a belated apology for the years she suffered alone. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The soft glow of her bedside lamp illuminated her face, deepening the lines etched by time. A cool autumn breeze slipped through the window, making her shoulders shiver despite her blanket. She felt no tears, no sadness, no joy, just an unnameable emptiness. Tomorrow, she'd submit the divorce papers. A single sheet of paper, a name erased from her life, a period at the end of a lifelong chapter bound by the title of wife. Closing her eyes, Clara tried to rest, but memories flickered like an old film reel, replaying the decades she'd lived through. Her gaze drifted toward the shed at the edge of the property, where Harold lived. It was a small, shingled cabin with 2 rooms, one for living, one for cooking. Morning smoke still curled from its chimney, blending into the dawn mist. The cabin stood apart from the grand 3-story house where Clara resided. Since returning to their old hometown, Harold had lived quietly in that corner of the land. Few visited him, not because he was unkind or avoided others, but because he'd been gone so long, people had nearly forgotten he belonged here. Harold had been away for over half his life, only returning to the town where his roots lay, where his kin, ancestors' graves, and the wife he once shared a life with remained. Long ago, he and Clara had lived in a modest clapboard house with a sloped roof, set in a yard with a vegetable garden and a few apple trees. It was the home his parents left him, where he and Clara started from nothing. They weren't wealthy, but they got by. Harold worked as a carpenter for the local co-op, while Clara tended the home, raised chickens, and grew produce. They had 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. Michael, at 14, was already helping with chores, chopping wood, and fetching water. Little Emily, just 3, with her golden curls, clung to Clara, chattering like a songbird. Life was hard but peaceful in Harold's memory. Mornings saw Clara at the farmer's market, selling vegetables, while he worked on furniture. The kids played barefoot in the yard, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. Afternoons, Harold and Michael would fish in the nearby creek, bringing home supper to cook with Clara. Those years felt eternal, until everything changed. It began with a job that took Harold away. Clara never imagined that his trip to a neighboring county to build a barn for a distant cousin would stretch into a 30-year absence. At first, she thought he'd be gone a week, maybe 2. Then a month passed, then 2, with no word. After a year, then 2, Clara sensed something was wrong. Rumors trickled back to town. Folks whispered they'd seen Harold in a rural mountain area, living with a young, fair-skinned woman with a warm smile and a baby. They said he was settled with her, like a husband. Clara's heart sank, but she clung to hope, believing he'd return for her and their children. One early morning, Clara packed a small bag, took Michael, and boarded a crowded bus to find her husband. After a grueling day's journey, she reached the place where Harold was living. Seeing him, she felt a rush of relief mixed with dread. He was thinner, his hair longer, his demeanor weathered. But his eyes were distant, no longer familiar. Trembling, Clara pleaded, "Honey, come home. The kids miss you so much. You can't leave them like this. Come back to us." Harold looked away, his voice flat. "I'm staying here. You should go." Clara's throat tightened. "How can you say that? The kids need you, they're growing up, and I can't do this alone. Even if you don't care for me, think of them." Sighing, Harold pulled a small wad of cash from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. "Take this for the kids. I'm not coming back." Clara stood frozen, her hands refusing the money, tears welling as her lips quivered. "I need you, a father for our children, not this cold cash." Just then, a young woman stepped out of the house, long hair, rosy cheeks, holding a toddler. She squinted at Clara, her tone sharp. "Lady, if he still loved you, he wouldn't be here with me. Stop clinging, it's tiring for everyone." Clara's heart shattered. She never imagined losing her husband, her children's father, in such a humiliating way. Clutching the crumpled bills Harold forced into her hand, she felt the sting of betrayal. She didn't cry, her tears had dried when Harold turned away, offering no defense as the younger woman mocked her. Clara gave him one last look, heavy with pain and resentment, then took Michael's hand and left. At the bus stop, Michael asked, "Mom, aren't we bringing Dad home?" Clara smoothed his hair, her lips tight. "No, sweetheart. Your father doesn't want to come back." Back home, she used the meager cash to buy groceries, splitting it to feed her kids. That night's dinner was quiet, the children chattered about school, but Clara sat still, picking at her food, her throat bitter with grief. From that day, Clara shed the role of the patient wife preserving a fragile home. With Harold gone, she realized no one else could be her anchor. She threw herself into every job available, hauling goods at the market, cleaning houses, sewing, cooking for events, anything to afford school supplies and clothes for her 4 kids. With a little savings, she teamed up with neighbors to buy and sell goods at nearby towns, each trip lasting days. Her children managed at home, with Michael, barely a teenager, taking charge. Sarah cooked and cared for her younger siblings, while Clara's mother-in-law, though frail, worried for her. One night, the old woman sighed to a neighbor, "She's out there working so hard, always gone. I'm afraid she'll burn out or leave the kids with me." Gossip swirled. Some said a woman whose husband left shouldn't be so ambitious, working day and night, risking her reputation. Clara heard it all but ignored it. Her only concern was ensuring her children were fed, educated, and never felt less than their peers. Clara did it. All 4 of her children grew up kind, excelled in school, and never dropped out. They were obedient, devoted, and loved their mother dearly. Every year, they brought home certificates of achievement, which Clara carefully tucked away in an old wooden chest, a quiet comfort, a testament to the years she single-handedly raised them. She wanted nothing more. Seeing her children grow into good, educated adults filled her heart. But that joy was short-lived. Another challenge loomed when her mother-in-law fell gravely ill. From the day the elderly woman became bedridden, Clara stopped her long trading trips. She stayed home, tending to her mother-in-law day and night, while taking in sewing and odd jobs to scrape by. For over a year, Clara endured sleepless nights, nursing her through fevers and moments when it seemed she wouldn't survive. Yet, with spoonfuls of plain porridge and Clara's tireless care, the old woman clung to life. The town knew Clara's story and called her a blessing. Few daughters-in-law would care for a mother-in-law with such devotion. As the woman grew weaker, her breaths heavier, there were days she couldn't eat. On lucid days, she'd grasp Clara's hand and whisper, "This home, this family, it's all because of you. Look after the kids." Clara, throat tight, nodded, holding back tears. The old woman never mentioned her only son, Harold. No blame, no questions, no mention, as if, in her final years, she'd erased him from her weary heart, worn out by longing and disappointment. One winter morning, before dawn, she slipped away like a wisp of incense smoke. Clara held her hand until the end, washing her face and dressing her with quiet sorrow. The funeral was handled with care, with Clara and Harold's sister managing everything, from the altar to ensuring a proper resting place. Townsfolk came to pay respects, eyes misty, whispering their pity for Harold's absence. His own mother dies, and he doesn't show his face. How heartless, they said. What's worse than a mother's passing with no son to mourn her? Clara didn't respond, silently praying before the casket. Only she knew Harold couldn't face returning. Not long before, a friend from out of town had brought news. Harold and the younger woman had gone bankrupt, fleeing from heavy debts they couldn't pay. Some said they'd vanished, others claimed Harold thought of coming home but turned back, fearing the town's scorn. Clara's heart ached, but she kept it from her mother-in-law, fearing the truth would break her. She chose silence to let the woman pass in peace. After the funeral, Clara handled all the memorial rites alone. As a daughter-in-law, she never shirked her duties. Years passed, and Clara quietly carried the family forward without a husband, never complaining, working tirelessly to raise her 4 children into fine adults. From her early days of odd jobs, market stalls, and sewing, Clara saved enough to open a small general store at the edge of town. It wasn't grand, but it gave her stability, sparing her the grueling daily hustle. With her savvy and honest dealings, the store thrived. Her grown children, understanding her sacrifices, pitched in. One helped at the store, another took side jobs, while others managed the household. From the poverty of their early years, Clara's family became a model of hard work and unity, rising through their own efforts. When she had enough, Clara rebuilt her in-laws' ancestral graves, adding proper headstones and shelters. The old clapboard house, weathered and creaking, she restored, new roof, fresh floors, sturdy doors, to honor the memories of a lifetime. When Michael, her eldest, married, he built a handsome 3-story home on the same land where Clara once huddled with her children through storms, scavenging for scraps in desperate times. Nearing 70, Clara finally knew ease, sipping morning tea, chatting with neighbors, and sharing lively dinners with her children and grandchildren. Her children and grandchildren adored and respected her. To them, Clara wasn't just their mother but their rock, a symbol of sacrifice and resilience. No one could believe this seemingly delicate woman, in her 30s with 4 young children and a frail mother-in-law, had overcome such hardship alone. Yet she did, with tears, calloused hands, and a heart that never broke. Did Clara ever think of Harold? Of course. She remembered the man who once shared her bed, her struggles, building a home, raising children, scraping by on meager meals. She recalled his silhouette pedaling home from the carpentry shop, sweat-soaked, carrying a bundle of greens for her to cook. But those memories were severed the day he left without a word. She thought he'd return after a few days, a month at most. But months became years, leaving her with 4 hungry children and a bedridden mother-in-law. On stormy nights, with no rice in the house, Clara boiled potatoes, dividing them among her mother-in-law and kids. She went without, smiling as tears burned inside. When her children fell ill or her mother-in-law groaned in pain, Clara would hold them, whispering, "If your father were here, I wouldn't be struggling like this." She never said it aloud, but she hated Harold to her core, hated how he turned his back, living comfortably with a younger woman while she broke her back for every meal, every school fee. "You're cruel, Harold," she once muttered alone in the dead of night, her sobs lost in the cold kitchen smoke. "How can you live with yourself?" She swore she'd never forgive him, never look at him again. But as years passed and her children grew, she stopped mentioning him, not because her anger faded, but to spare her children from hatred. When they were young, they'd ask, "Where's Dad? Why doesn't he come home?" Clara would shake her head. "He's busy, sweetheart. He'll come when he's done." As they matured, they stopped asking. Clara sometimes wanted to urge them to find Harold, to know if he was well or suffering, to know their father. But all 4 avoided it, not wanting to reopen her wounds. Once, Emily, the youngest, said softly, "Don't dwell on it, Mom. Stay healthy and enjoy your time with us. Let the past go." Clara nodded, eyes red, relieved they didn't seek him out but also afraid of what news of Harold might bring. She thought she'd never see him again, that the past was buried. Then, one day, with her eyes dimming, steps slowing, and hair more gray than black, Harold returned. No warning, no message. That morning, her neighbor Mrs. Carter rushed over, breathless. "Clara, I saw an old man at the edge of town, asking for your house. He had an old backpack, looked familiar." Clara froze, the teapot slipping from her hands. Could it be him? The question echoed, unanswered. She sat still, the wind outside tugging the curtains like a sigh. Clara paused mid-sweep, her heart clenching. Her fading eyes blinked blankly. "Are you sure? It's been so long, would you even recognize him?" Her voice trembled. Mrs. Carter shook her head. "No mistake. Tall, thin, hunched, wearing a faded cap, carrying a worn backpack. He asked my grandson if this was Clara Thompson's house." Clara stood motionless, the broom slipping from her grip. She didn't rush out or ask more, frozen as memories of 30 years ago flooded back, the day Harold left, abandoning her and their children like strangers. At the street's end, Harold stood hesitating before the rusted iron gate. Before him rose a pristine 3-story house, white with balconies draped in ivy and hanging ferns. He blinked, disoriented. Everything was unfamiliar. Then his daughter-in-law, Ellen, Michael's wife, noticed a stranger peering in and approached. "Excuse me, sir, who are you looking for?" She asked because, after years as Clara's daughter-in-law, she'd never seen her father-in-law's face. Harold leaned toward the gate, his cloudy eyes squinting. "Is this Clara Thompson's house?" "The daughter-in-law of old Mrs. Thompson?" "Yes, that's right," Ellen replied. "Who are you?" Before he could answer, Harold's gaze swept the yard, memories crashing over him. He stood rooted, eyes straining to trace the past in a changed landscape. The apple tree in the corner, where he and Michael used to pick fruit for Clara to sell at the market, still stood, older and gnarled. The pear tree by the fence remained, its branches heavier. Near the wall was the old kitchen shed where his mother once cooked, her meals always fragrant, free of ash. His eyes settled on the grand house ahead, his throat tightening. He'd lived here, built this life with Clara from nothing, dreaming of a simple home, a good wife, happy kids. But poverty had suffocated him, its grip relentless. He started working farther away, then met a young woman, fair-skinned, charming, worlds apart from his plain, overworked wife. He fell for her flattery, her easy affection, and abandoned everything, Clara, their children, his waiting mother. Now, returning, he saw how much had changed, the house grand, the children grown, the land transformed. He felt like a beggar in the place he once called home. They say leaves fall back to their roots, but Harold knew he was like a frog returning to its hill long after death. He'd once vowed never to return, to spare Clara and the kids the shame of a worthless husband and father. But life unraveled, his new partner left, his strength faded, and with nowhere else to turn, the home he'd forsaken haunted his dreams. The land, the house, the family he'd left behind. Lost in fractured memories, Harold flinched as a motorcycle pulled up at the gate. He lowered his face, turning to leave, instinct urging him to avoid the son he'd abandoned as a boy. He only wanted a glimpse to ease his longing, then to slip away. But Ellen called out, "Sir, come in for some tea. My husband just got home." Ellen, holding her toddler, eyed the weathered man shuffling in the yard. When he didn't respond, she whispered to Michael, "There's a strange man here. I asked, but he won't say anything." Michael, reaching for his child, hadn't fully looked until he glanced over. A jolt ran through him. That tall, thin frame, the hunched back, the thinning gray hair spilling from a cap, it was unmistakable. His lips parted, the word "Dad" rising, then catching in his throat. Because there, on the porch, stood Clara, staring down at the yard. Her gaze was steady, neither angry nor sorrowful, just deep, carrying a lifetime of waiting. That look struck Michael, pulling him back to his childhood. He saw the years without a father, only his mother. He remembered carrying his siblings to school, rushing home to haul water and light the stove. Nights when Clara sewed by lamplight, saying, "Study hard, son. Education will save you from my struggles." The memories flooded him, pressing against his chest. He stood frozen, unable to move or speak, his throat bitter with emotion. Harold, turning toward the gate to slip away, caught his son's eyes. The look stopped him cold. 30 years ago, when he left, Michael was a scrawny teen, barely taller than the kitchen door, his face boyish. Now, a grown man stood before him, steady and strong. The steady, resolute gaze of Michael stopped Harold in his tracks, his lips trembling, a single word, "Son," escaping before choking in his throat. Clara broke the silence. "Invite your father inside," she said. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating. In that moment, Ellen began to piece it together. She gently set her toddler down and nudged him. "Say hello to Grandpa." The boy obediently clasped his hands. "Hello, sir," he said politely. The innocent greeting echoed across the wide yard, and Harold turned away, wiping tears from his weathered, dust-streaked cheeks. Inside, incense smoke curled around the altar, veiling the portrait of Clara's late mother-in-law, Mrs. Thompson. Her silver hair hung loosely in the photo, her somber eyes seeming to watch the scene unfolding below. Harold stepped onto the porch, each footfall heavy as stone. Though the house was newly built, traces of its old shape lingered, stirring a lump in his throat. Every brick, every doorframe carried memories he'd let slip away over 30 years. Soon, the other children arrived, summoned urgently by Michael. Emily, the youngest, stood at the far end of the room, silent. She didn't greet or smile, only watched her father with a guarded stare. Years without him had forged a cold shell around her heart. She'd wasted too many years hoping for something that never came. The room remained thick with tension after the unexpected reunion. Clara's eyes moved slowly over her 4 children, each now grown, with lives of their own. Their strength had carried her through the husbandless years. Her gaze lingered longest on Michael, the eldest, who'd taken on the role of provider when Harold left. As a teenager, he'd plowed fields, cared for his siblings, and risen early, a man of the house before his time. Now, Clara was used to letting her children decide. She'd climbed against the wind her whole life. Now, she wanted to rest and let them steer the ship. After a long silence, Michael spoke. "What's your plan, Dad? Staying or leaving again?" Harold, head bowed, shoulders slumped, flinched as if an old wound had been prodded. He slowly looked up, his eyes meeting the familiar face of the son he'd abandoned as a boy. His gaze then found Clara, standing quietly in the corner. She was no longer the gaunt, sun-worn woman in a straw hat, carrying a market basket. Now fuller, her skin brighter, her clothes neat, hair pinned up, her face calm yet piercing. At 70, age hadn't dimmed her presence but sharpened her quiet strength. Harold spoke, his voice shaky and hoarse, as if wind scraped through his throat. "I know I've wronged you, wronged your mother, wronged all of you. I came to light incense for Grandma. Then I'll go." Sarah, the eldest daughter, who'd been silent, now spoke, her voice soft but sharp. "Go where? You've been gone our whole lives." Harold fell silent. Clara already knew the story. Up in the mountains, he'd lived in the younger woman's family home. They had a child, but later, another man claimed to be the father. With no ties left, Harold had nowhere to cling to. He only bowed his head, unable to answer Sarah's question. He knew no words could mend the rift carved deep in his children's hearts. A soft sniffle broke the quiet. It was Sarah. She turned to Clara, eyes red, voice choking. "Mom, I know he's wrong, terribly wrong. But he's still our father. You've done so much for us. Can't you let him stay?" The room stilled. All eyes turned to Clara. She looked out at the yard, where tree shadows stretched under the fading sun. Her face softened, no longer cold, but held the calm of someone who'd weathered too many storms. Hearing Sarah's quiet plea, she closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, her gaze resting on Harold, the man who'd once been her husband, the father of her children, now a shadow hunched before her. She spoke slowly, clearly. "Stay or go, this is still your home. The kids and I always waited for you. But you've only come back now, after all these years." Her voice wavered slightly, a flicker of emotion rising, but she steadied it. With a soft sigh, she added, "It's up to you." Then she turned and walked into the house, leaving Harold and the children standing in silence. No one spoke. The air thickened, broken only by Sarah's stifled sobs. The tension wrapped around Harold, his silver hair catching the light. He looked around the pristine, orderly house, gleaming floors, everything too grand, too neat. His worn clothes, faded bag caked with red dust, tattered cap, and scuffed shoes left by the door felt out of place. He was a ghost from the past, unfit for this present. His eyes settled on the altar, where his mother's portrait gazed down, her gentle eyes accusing. "Why return now to your roots? Why remember your family only when your hair's gone white?" Trembling, Harold wiped his tears, bowed 3 times before the altar, each bow a silent apology. He hoisted his bag, clutched his faded cap, and moved toward the door, ready to leave without looking back. No one stopped him. David, the second son, who'd been quiet, suddenly spoke, as if grasping at something slipping away. "Michael, say something." The words cut through the heavy air, startling everyone. Michael, who'd shouldered the family's burden since childhood, remained silent. His eyes fixed on his father, clouded with years of unspoken pain and nameless wounds. Harold, near the door, cap in hand, bag slung over his shoulder, stood under the dim afternoon light. He meant to leave, and no one held him back. He knew Michael's silence hurt more than any rebuke. As a 14-year-old when Harold left, Michael had set aside childhood, stepping into life earlier than his peers. He studied, worked, and became the father figure for his siblings while Clara was away. Life forged him into a strong, seasoned man, but at the cost of a hardened heart, weighed by questions without answers. Why did his father leave? For whom? For what? Selfishness? A prettier woman? Were his children a burden? He never got answers, and that fueled a cold, lingering anger, a silent wound that never healed. That silence, painful, unyielding, shielded him. He knew if Harold hadn't left, he might not have grown up so fast. But that same absence gave him the grit to build this life, the sturdy 3-story house, a home for his mother, siblings, and children. It was the one solace amid the emptiness. A week later, Harold, who'd quietly returned, left again. The house felt lighter, but unnameable emotions lingered. No one spoke of the past or questioned Clara, though each child carried the image of their father's frail figure fading beyond the gate, his worn shoes shuffling, head bowed, never looking back. One afternoon, with all her children gathered, Clara spoke slowly. "I think you should bring your father home. He's your flesh and blood. Yes, he's wronged us, terribly. But we don't abandon family." The room grew quiet. Sarah spoke first. "Will he even come, Mom?" Clara nodded faintly. "I spoke to him. He won't come to the main house, just wants a small place in the yard to live. He says he doesn't want to burden anyone, doesn't feel worthy of this house." Michael sat in silence, then gave a slight nod. The others didn't object. They knew they couldn't stay cold forever. Following Clara's wishes, they hired workers to build Harold a small 2-room cabin at the yard's edge, shingled red, facing the creek where he and Michael once fished as a boy. It was modest but cozy, with a living space, a kitchen, a plastic table and chairs on the porch, and a patch of marigolds out front. Harold moved in, living alone. He never visited the main house, keeping to himself, asking for nothing. Each morning, he swept the yard, brewed weak tea, and sat gazing at the creek. On dry afternoons, he'd catch a few small fish to cook and store. He lived like a shadow returned to an old haunt, present yet barely there. Sometimes, Sarah, visiting Clara, would stop by the cabin, bringing cookies, fruit, or a little cash. "Take this for medicine, Dad. The weather's been rough." Harold accepted the food but refused the money. "I'm fine, Sarah. Save it for your mom and the kids. I don't want to owe more than I already do." Sarah wiped her eyes, forcing a smile. "We're family, don't talk like a stranger." But sitting together, each with a glass of tea, they struggled to find words. It wasn't hatred but the weight of time, emotions frozen too long to thaw easily. Sarah wanted to share her life, her job, her husband's betrayals, the lonely days raising her kids with only Clara by her side. But the words wouldn't come. How could she start? They sat, father and daughter, separated by a small plastic table and a cooling teapot, yet miles apart. She longed to ask, "Where were you when we needed you, when we envied kids with fathers, crying in secret? Where were you for our milestones? Did you know I dreamed of calling you Dad, of you driving me to school just once?" But she didn't ask, and he didn't either. Could he ask, "How did you grow up? Who did you love? Are you happy?" He knew each question would cut, reminding them both of his failures and her years of resentment. So her visits grew shorter, words fewer. Sarah would sit briefly, pack up uneaten cookies, leave a carton of milk on the shelf, and say, "I'm heading back." Harold nodded, lips moving silently. Only when she disappeared past the apple trees did he stand, stepping onto the porch to sit alone. The little red-shingled cabin became his world, undisturbed, unneeded. Age limited him. On sunny days, he swept the yard, brewed tea, and watched the creek. On windy afternoons, he sat by the window, the sun sinking west, casting a fiery orange glow that faded into cold mist. Light spilled through the small window, his shadow wavering on the chilly floor. From the main house, familiar sounds of family life drifted, grandkids calling for their parents, toy cars buzzing on the brick patio, Michael's motorcycle at the gate, footsteps on the porch, Clara and Ellen chatting in the kitchen, the clatter of knives and boiling water. Harold heard it all, every day, sitting still, listening to the family he yearned for but couldn't touch. Each time, his heart ached. Clara sat quietly on the old oak bed, its varnish chipped, its surface worn smooth by time. This was the bed where her mother-in-law lay in her final years, passing without peace, waiting for a son who never returned. From the half-open wooden shutter, Clara looked toward the cabin, nestled under a bare persimmon tree. Every evening, she saw Harold sitting alone at his plastic table under the tree, the setting sun casting his shadow across the mossy bricks. His eyes stared into the distance, lost in thoughts or memories she couldn't guess. Occasionally, Harold lifted the teacup to his lips, sipped slowly, and set it down, as if stretching each moment of his existence. He sat there, silent and withdrawn, until the sound of his grandchild's voice calling Mommy, Daddy. Or the rumble of Michael's motorcycle at the gate, or the lively chatter between Ellen and Clara in the kitchen drifted from the main house. Each time, a faint, incomplete smile flickered across his face, just enough to show he still felt something for the life unfolding around him, even if he was no longer part of it. From her upstairs room, in the shadowed corner of memory and reality, Clara watched it all, silent. Her heart could find no peace. If Harold hadn't returned, she could have told herself he was living well somewhere, settled and content. She'd have been fine with her children and grandchildren. Or if he'd come back after she was gone, she wouldn't have to grapple with feelings long folded away in the quiet corners of her life. But he was here, not quite a husband, not a stranger, not a guest. Living silently at the yard's edge, present yet absent. His presence made it impossible for her to act as if nothing had changed, to laugh freely with her family as she once did. When her heart couldn't let go, peace remained elusive. Since Harold's return, living quietly in the small cabin, Clara's heart was never at ease. Though he didn't intrude, demand, or complain, his silent existence weighed on her. Every glance at the backyard, seeing him shuffle alone like a shadow, brought back a lifetime of memories, a life as a woman, a wife, a daughter-in-law, and a mother, all in solitude. Late at night, when the streets fell silent and her family slept, Clara sat on her bed, knees drawn up, staring at the window. She sighed. It wasn't that she hadn't forgiven, but she'd never truly let go. They say a day as husband and wife creates a bond, let alone a marriage that bore 4 children. She told herself this often. Yet, looking back, she realized she'd hardly known a single day as a wife in the truest sense. From the start, their marriage was marked by scarcity. When Harold left, she raised their children alone, cared for his mother, worked tirelessly, and endured the town's whispers. The small, quiet cabin he now occupied gnawed at her. Every day, she saw him sweeping the yard, cooking, sitting alone under the old persimmon tree, wordless but heavy with sorrow. His silence fueled her unease. She wanted her children to connect with their father, but they were grown, busy with their own lives, their own reasons. One day, Emily visited and whispered, "Mom, I want to talk to Dad, but I don't know where to start." Clara nodded faintly. "I understand. You've been without him too long. There's little to cherish and too much to resent." Indeed, her children grew up not with a father's embrace but through independence, resilience, and leaning on each other. The townsfolk's words, more cruel than kind, still stung. Clara could never forget the taunts that haunted her for years. your mom couldn't keep her man, so he left. She must have been too harsh, drove him away. She vividly recalled one afternoon, decades ago, etched in her memory. Michael, then a teenager, was hauling fishing nets from the field, his shirt soaked with sweat under the blazing sun. A neighbor, whether out of malice or carelessness, called out loudly, "Your dad ran off with another woman, didn't he? Your mom didn't know how to keep him happy, so here you are, a kid without a father." Michael said nothing, trudging home, tears streaming. At the porch, he sobbed, "Why don't you just leave him, Mom, so people stop talking?" Clara's heart felt crushed. She pulled him close, wiping her own tears. "In my time, sweetheart, a man leaving his wife was normal, but a woman leaving her husband? They'd call her ruined, wicked, unable to hold her head up. I stayed for you kids, not for him." Had she left, she might have been freer, no more borrowing to cover family obligations, no sleepless nights waiting for a husband who never returned, no judgmental stares from his relatives. But she had 2 daughters, and people said a girl's path mirrors her mother's. If Clara had left, someone might later sneer at Sarah or Emily, "Your mom was like that too." Besides, her mother-in-law, though frail, loved her and her grandchildren deeply. She'd once said, "Clara, Harold's heartless, but don't let the kid suffer. A mother who endures and keeps the family whole raises good children." Those words stayed with Clara. Now, seeing Harold again, eyes dim, steps weary, heart cold, she couldn't force herself to relive a bond that had long since scarred over. Watching him in the cabin, sweeping, cooking, sitting alone, she felt pity but couldn't draw near. She wanted her children to care for him, but they were adults with their own lives. She couldn't demand they act as if the years of absence hadn't happened. The gap was too wide, the memories too full of loss and resentment, with few moments of warmth. Clara sighed. One day, as Sarah peeled an orange for her child, she murmured, "Mom, why not let Dad move into the main house with you?" Clara shook her head, voice low. "Living close but not understanding, not talking, not feeling, that hurts more than being apart. Could you stand pretending someone's not there every day?" Since Michael built the cabin at Harold's request, Clara had considered this. But she feared disrupting her children's lives, making them uncomfortable, or adding to their burdens. Yet, living this way, seeing him daily but ignoring him, was like treating the living as dead. How could her heart find peace when the man who'd been her husband, the father of her children, was a shadow in her yard? Harold's return wasn't a tragedy, but it wasn't a blessing either. It was an old scar stung by a cold wind, aching but never healing. Clara thought long and hard, wrestling through sleepless nights. She wondered if she could accept it, live quietly through her remaining years, but realized she'd be pretending, living for others again. True peace wouldn't come from endless endurance. She needed to act for herself, for the first time after a lifetime of carrying others. So she decided to divorce. Near dawn, she still couldn't sleep. The night stretched long, memories of joy, sorrow, and everything in between laid bare. Tomorrow, she'd start a new life, her own. The next morning, Clara and her children drove to the county courthouse to file for divorce. In the car, silence reigned. No one asked questions, only the occasional cough or the soft squeak of tires on the sunlit road broke the quiet. Clara sat in the back beside Sarah, while David drove, solemn. Though they'd agreed, their eyes in the rearview mirror betrayed unspoken sadness. At the courthouse, when the clerk asked Harold if he agreed to the divorce, he answered briefly, "I don't want to divorce her. She's a good wife, a very good wife." His voice choked, eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding everyone. He offered no explanation, no defense, just bowed his head, as he'd done for months in the cabin. When Clara's turn came, she recounted everything, Harold's abandonment, her years raising their children alone, caring for his mother, working tirelessly. Her voice held no blame, no self-pity, just clear, measured truth. I don't resent or hate him. I just want to live my final years in peace. Our marriage ended decades ago. He's back, but we're no longer husband and wife. I ask the law to recognize that, so my heart can be light, and my children free of worry. After a brief discussion, considering their ages, Harold nearing 80, Clara 70, the court granted the divorce, honoring their mutual consent. Leaving the courthouse, Harold and Clara walked in the same direction, silent. Sarah quietly joined her mother at the car. Michael helped Clara into the back seat. Harold trailed a few steps behind, hands in his pockets, head low, his stooped figure casting a long shadow on the sunlit bricks. In the car, Clara sat still, the breeze through the window brushing silver strands across her cheek. She glanced out, then at the rearview mirror. There, she saw Harold walking behind, his white hair catching the light, his steps slow under the golden autumn sun. A strange, bittersweet feeling welled up, vague but piercing. Memories flooded back like a hazy film. Long ago, after a night of festival music in the town square, Harold had taken her hand, leading her from the village to become his bride. He was young then, tall and upright, his grip firm yet trembling with emotion. Those days were more than half a lifetime ago. Now, neither had the courage to revisit them, nor the strength to start anew. As the car neared the town's edge, Clara spoke softly to Michael. "Son, stop by the family chapel." He nodded, pulling over. Clara opened the door, stepping out with slow but steady steps. It had been years since she'd visited, though it was close to home, not for lack of chance, but because her heart had never felt free enough. Entering the wooden doors of the Thompson family chapel, the air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and lingering incense. The brick floor, worn and moss-streaked, stretched to the altar. Clara lit a stick of incense, stood before it, and prayed, her lips moving clearly. "Ancestors, for years I've upheld my husband's duties, funerals, memorials, contributions, never lacking. I ask to be released from my role as wife. Bear witness to my heart's peace." The incense glowed, a thin wisp of smoke rising like the silent years she'd endured. Stepping out, Clara looked up at the clear autumn sky, a cloudless blue. She breathed deeply, her hand brushing her wrinkled cheek, then touching the sparse, white bun at her nape, once thick, now thin. She smiled to herself, a quiet, peaceful smile. Along the road, passers-by nodded in greeting, mirroring her smile. Her face, warm and simple, seemed unburdened, as if a great weight had lifted. A neighbor spotted her and called out cheerfully, "Clara, where you coming from? Been a while." Clara paused, her eyes flickering with surprise, as if hearing something new. Then she laughed, a true, bright laugh, and replied, "I had some business this morning. Now I'm off to the market." The neighbor, not grasping the full meaning, nodded and moved on. Clara paused, realizing, her name was Clara. The name her parents gave her at birth. Since marrying, she'd been Mrs. Thompson, Michael's mom, Harold's wife, the Thompson family's daughter-in-law. Clara had faded, living for others. But today, with the divorce finalized, she was herself again, no longer a shadow. She was Clara. From now on, Clara. She headed to the market. The autumn noon was gentle, sunlight warm, a breeze rustling through the old sycamores. She'd buy trout, green bananas, and some pork belly. Today, she'd cook trout with bananas and pumpkin soup, David's favorite. It had been ages since she cooked properly. David had often invited her to live with him and his wife in their new two-story home, but she'd hesitated, partly shy, partly unready. Now, having let go, she could no longer stay in the ancestral home with Michael. She wanted Michael to take Harold in, to care for him in his old age, as was right. The knots were untied. From today, she'd live with David, spending her later years fully with her children and grandchildren, free of resentment or regret. Clara walked on, her shadow stretching across the sunlit village road. Ahead, the market buzzed with chatter and laughter. She stepped into a new life, late but hers alone. Clara's story, a woman who found the courage near life's end to release a long-lost marriage, moves us and reminds us that happiness is never too late, if we dare live true to ourselves. Despite a youth of burdens, she held on to kindness and, in the end, reclaimed her name, her true self, in peace. If this story touched you, please leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more heartfelt, real stories like this.